They call him just a cleaner. But beneath this darkness, he carries the weight of a city that never sees him, and a heart cleaner than the world above. The morning light hadn't yet broken through the tall glass towers of the city when a man in a faded orange jumpsuit walked quietly down the empty street. His name was Elijah Carter, and while the world hurried above him, chasing promotions and parking tickets, Elijah's world began below, in the tunnels nobody wanted to see. The air down there was heavy, thick with the stench of decay, mud, and human waste. Every clang of his shovel echoed through the narrow pipes like a hollow reminder that this was his life. People crossed the street when they saw him climb out of the manhole. They looked at his stained boots, his hands, his dark skin, and then looked away, pretending not to notice the man who kept their streets from drowning. No one ever said thank you, but Elijah didn't expect it anymore. He had long stopped expecting anything from people who thought worth was measured by a clean shirt and a corner office. What they didn't know was that beneath that dirt-covered uniform lived a man who once had dreams bigger than any building above those streets. He used to play jazz. He used to smile. He used to believe the world was fair. That was before life buried him under layers of judgment, layers deeper than any sewer he ever cleaned. One day, the city was in panic. A major downtown pipe had burst beneath a luxury hotel, flooding the lower levels. News cameras rolled. Engineers in bright helmets stood scratching their heads, arguing about pressure systems and blueprints. And then came the line Elijah would never forget. "Just get one of the sewer guys," someone shouted. "They're used to getting dirty anyway." The laughter that followed was short, but sharp. It cut right through him. He didn't react. He just put on his gloves, climbed down the ladder, and disappeared into the darkness, the way invisible people do. But what nobody saw that day was that Elijah had a plan in his head before his boots even touched the tunnel floor. He knew those pipes better than anyone alive. He'd memorized every bend, every valve, every sound the system made when it cried for help. He shut his eyes for a moment, letting the vibrations of rushing water guide him, a skill no textbook could teach. Then he began turning valves one by one, listening to the metal sing. Within an hour, the flood began to ease. The engineers above started noticing. They looked down the manhole, confused. The foreman's radio crackled. "It's stabilizing. Whatever he's doing, it's working." When Elijah climbed out, dripping wet but calm, the crowd stared. The man they'd laughed at had just saved them from a multi-million-dollar disaster. But before anyone could speak, a young engineer, clean shirt, silver watch, said, "Wow, lucky guess, huh?" Lucky. That's what they always called it when someone like him succeeded. A lucky guess. Elijah smiled faintly and said nothing. He just walked away, boots splashing through the puddles, leaving behind men who would take credit before sunset. That night, he sat alone in his small apartment. The walls were thin, the heater broken, but it was quiet, and in that quiet, he reached for an old wooden box under his bed. Inside it were photos of a younger man in uniform, standing tall in a group of soldiers. He had medals once. He had rank. He had pride. But when he came home from the war, things were different. The job he was promised never came. The respect he earned on the battlefield disappeared in the airport crowd. They didn't see a hero when they looked at him. They saw his skin, and that was enough. So he took the job no one wanted, the one people mocked, the one they thought was beneath them. And yet somehow, he never stopped showing up. Weeks passed, and news spread about the miracle fix under the hotel. A local news channel wanted to interview the team of engineers. Of course, They didn't mention Elijah's name, not once. But fate has a strange way of turning, like a rusty valve that eventually gives way. A few months later, a massive city event was held. The Mayor's Infrastructure Awards. Cameras, officials, all the people who used to walk past him now shaking hands under chandeliers. Elijah was on duty outside that night, unclogging a storm drain near the same venue. He could hear the laughter inside, the clinking glasses, the sound of applause for people who took credit for the work he had done. Then, thunder. The sky opened up, heavy rain hammering the pavement. Within minutes, water began to rise fast. The engineers panicked again. Guests screamed as the parking lot flooded. Inside, a voice on the speaker shouted, "We're losing power. The generators are flooding." Someone yelled, "Where's the maintenance crew?" And out in the storm, Elijah pulled his hood over his head and ran toward the overflow pipes. His body ached, but he moved with purpose. He had seen this before. He knew what was coming. He pried open the main valve with a rusted wrench, the rain mixing with sewer water, the current nearly pulling him under. His flashlight flickered, but he kept going, shouting into the dark, "Not tonight! Not again!" He reached the final junction, but the lever was jammed. Years of corrosion had sealed it tight. He grabbed the handle with both hands, muscles trembling, boots slipping on wet concrete, until finally, with a guttural yell, it gave way. The pressure burst free, redirecting the flood. The drains roared to life. The water level began to fall. When the fire department arrived, they found him sitting against the tunnel wall, breathing hard, face streaked with rain and grime, but alive. The city was saved again. And again, no one would have known his name, if not for one man. A reporter covering the event found security footage from the previous incident months ago. He saw the same man, same orange uniform, crawling through water, doing the impossible. The next morning, the headline read, "Unsung Hero. City worker saves thousands from flood." Twice. Photos went viral. People were stunned. The same people who once turned their noses away from him were now calling him a hero. But Elijah didn't bask in it. He didn't smile for cameras. When asked by a reporter what kept him doing this work after all the years of being ignored, he simply said, "Because someone's got to clean up what others leave behind, not just in the streets, but in their hearts." Weeks later, a young boy knocked on his door. He said his name was Marcus, a high school kid doing a project about everyday heroes. He wanted to interview Elijah. At first, Elijah hesitated, but then he saw something in that boy's eyes. Curiosity, respect, something he hadn't seen in years. They sat outside on the stoop as the sun set over the city. Marcus asked, "Doesn't it bother you that people treated you like you were nothing?" Elijah smiled, slow and kind. "Son, people only see the dirt if they forget who they are under it. You can't change how they look at you, but you can make them look twice." Marcus wrote those words down. They'd stay with him forever. A month later, the mayor officially honored Elijah with a city medal of service. Crowds cheered. Cameras flashed. He stood quietly, holding the medal in his weathered hands, then looked up at the ceiling, tears forming. In that moment, he wasn't just a janitor. He wasn't the sewer guy. He was every person who had ever been overlooked, disrespected, or made to feel small because of the job they did or the color of their skin. And as the applause filled the hall, Elijah whispered softly to himself, "Maybe now they finally see us." That night, after all the noise had faded, he went back to his apartment. The same cracked walls, the same broken heater. But this time, something was different. He opened that old wooden box again, took out one of his medals from the war, and placed it beside the new one. 2 medals, one for fighting for his country and one for fighting to be seen in it. He looked out the window at the glowing city skyline and smiled, because heroes don't always wear suits. Sometimes they wear rubber boots. Sometimes they walk beneath the streets. And sometimes they rise from the places no one dares to look, just to remind the world that dignity has no uniform. Never judge the hands that keep your world clean. They might be the hands that once held the world together.